and so on. So you'd actually end up doing like a level 89 zone if you did like top T16s, T17s. You'd actually be heading towards that level 89 zone. And this way, you would increase the amount of time the player base plays. You would end up with a lot more builds, feeling like they're achieving at endgame. Hello and welcome to this video. Now, this video will either be before or after the video where I initially discussed what I'm about to talk about. But we have the next league coming, obviously. But I want to talk about how they can actually improve the end game for PoE 1. And it's sort of hard to get your head around until I explain everything, but stay with me. Okay, so the reason why a lot of people leave the league is either they can't achieve what they want to achieve, or they achieve everything they want to achieve and there's nothing left for them, and they don't want to just grind out the same thing over and over and over and over again. So, to fix that, change up the end game in this way. The end game, so you still got 4 void stones that do all the void stone stuff and create T16s throughout the entire list. But I suggest that they create sections. So, league start, you've just hit maps. The maps that are deemed white, yellow, red, T17, and then the Uber bosses are the breakpoints. So, you would still be able to turn them to T16s, but you could only buff the difficulty of the maps, and then the bosses that are responsible for those maps, not the individual bosses. I'll get onto which bosses. And you can only buff the bosses of those to give more loot, make them slightly more difficult, higher tier loot, and all that by beating these bosses. So white maps, you would have Infinite Hunger and Black Star, and that would be your end game. So this would be for people that can farm Shaper but not really do much else. They can do T17 maps but can't kill the boss. And then through doing this, they obviously get better character or more gear or more currency and stuff, so they can either buff their character or create another character. The yellow maps, you would assign Eater and Exile to. The same thing, you would only be able to buff the maps and the bosses by completing obviously the boss kills, and then that makes it harder. Say the initial levels, you buff it by 10, 15, 20, 25%. And then obviously if you can still wipe that out, we end up in the red tier where you can farm. The bosses assigned to that would probably be Shaper, Elder, and possibly Maven or Uber Elder, as in the not Uber, just Uber where you initially get the Void Stone from. So I'd stick Maven in the T17 plus and just put Uber Elder into the red map tier, and then you buff that up, get that up to like 25% buffed. Not necessarily you have to go through these must buff the first, second, third level, but if you had a character that couldn't do the next level, you would then obviously buff the level you can do. And then you would then have T17s and Ubers in, and I would put Maven in the T17 parts, and then you would be able to buff the T17s and the Ubers by killing the bosses and putting points into like a passive tree type thing. Or you get points within taking out X amount of the bosses, and then you get like level 2 zone, level 3 zone. So you end up increasing, what is it, 68 is the starter white maps. So your 68 zone would become a 69, 70, 71, 72, all the way up to, say, like 5 levels. So the top tier white maps would end up being about 77, 78. And then the yellow, and so on. So you'd actually end up doing like a level 89 zone if you did like top T16s, T17s. You'd actually be heading towards that level 89 zone. And this way, you would increase the amount of time the player base plays. You would end up with a lot more builds, feeling like they're achieving at endgame. You would have a sort of breakdown of where your build can go. If you got some uber killer that virtually can't die, you would end up with doing content where you actually feel like it's competitive. And if you got step down from that, you can still do high level content, feel like you're achieving. Step down from that, same thing. This would actually increase the amount of players that stay for a month, 2 months, 3 months, because they feel like they are achieving, they are getting drops, they are getting currency. They do not have to rely on having the uber killer character to be able to get high level drops. You would then end up with a lot of the drops throughout the end game, but still level capped for the area level. But you'd be able to actually just work on the end game with that sort of thing, and it would actually make people take on the bosses that they don't necessarily take on anyway. But yeah, let me know what you think about that and everything. Obviously, it's just my idea that came to my head. It's not a full written out, detailed thing. So let me know what you think, and if you agree that it would be a good idea, any tweaks, anything like that. If you don't agree with my idea, then you don't agree with my idea. But I'll catch you next time in the next video, and goodbye.